And welcome to this Monday edition of Top Story. Of course, one of the big stories is that NAFTA has not only just been renamed, but Canada has finally made a deal. It's taken a year. Canada's back in a revamped North American free trade deal with the States and Mexico after weeks and weeks of bitter, high-pressure negotiations that brushed up against a midnight deadline. So the agreement came together last night just before midnight imposed by the U.S. The new deal will be called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. So it replaces the 24-year-old North American free trade agreement, which Trump called a job-killing disaster. We kind of understand how he feels at this point, how he feels about NAFTA. In a joint statement at 1:45 this morning, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland, who have been working really closely together, they said the agreement will strengthen the middle class and create good, well-paying jobs and new opportunities. The agreement keeps a NAFTA dispute resolution process that the U.S. wanted to get rid of and offers Canada some protection if Trump goes ahead with plans to impose tariffs on cars, trucks, and auto parts imported into the States. Canada seems to have escaped the president's favorite sledgehammer, Section 232 national security tariffs, which would slap 20 to 25% duties on cars and auto parts imported into the States. Trump has agreed that no hard limit will be placed on Canadian auto exports to the States, though if the U.S. moves forward with the imposition of worldwide 232 tariffs on autos, those would also apply to Canada. What Ottawa has negotiated is effectively at this point an exemption, because it would still be able to export cars and parts tariff-free up to a certain amount, well above what Canada currently sends south of the border. According to the Dairy Farmers of Canada, that was another big issue. The new deal would give American farmers greater access to Canada's dairy industry, worth about 3.6% of Canada's current dairy market. The U.S. had negotiated access worth 3.25% of Canada's market in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but then they withdrew, leaving that share of Canada's market now available to dairy products from the countries that remain in that agreement, like New Zealand and Australia, for instance. But more significant to the industry's long-term viability is the dismantling of Canada's Class 7 dairy ingredient pricing strategy. That's a solution to Canada's skim milk surplus that was negotiated between Canadian farmers and processors. As that late push for a new NAFTA deal took place yesterday, Quebec Liberal leader Philippe Couillard said he would explore all judicial options to block an agreement that drops protections for dairy farmers.
I think they are very good. You know, we never take anything for granted. Obviously, we'll work very hard. Our volunteers are working hard. Our candidates are working very hard. But you see the quality of the people we're bringing forward. And I want the Gaspé people to have an influence in our next government. They will have. They will be around the table where decisions are made, and that's very important for us and for the public here, the population here. Well, look at what we have accomplished. Look at how Quebec is now compared to 2014. Look at what now we can do because of what we have done, because of the means we have, the means of our ambitions. And we want to push forward Quebec forward towards more prosperity, always fairness also, and a greener future for our children. That's the vision I have. That's the vision we have. And that's why I hope Quebecers will trust us for the next government as well.
And the polls are showing a CAQ minority or even a majority government on Monday?
Or a liberal majority or a liberal minority. Nobody knows. That's a reality.
Merci. Merci.
In the meantime, the loonie soared higher in the wake of news that Canada reached the USMCA. The loonie traded higher at 78.13% US, compared with an average of 77.25 cents US on Friday. Here's more in this report from Global News.
Canada and the United States reached a NAFTA deal just hours before the midnight deadline as negotiators frantically worked against the clock to come up with an agreement. The new agreement will no longer be called NAFTA. It will be called the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, replacing the name. And tonight on a call, senior U.S. officials said that they consider it a major victory for the Trump administration. They also think it's a good deal for Canada and for the United States. Departing his office tonight, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said he thinks it's a good deal for Canada. We're expecting to hear more from the Canadian government tomorrow about this, but for now, here's what we know about the deal. Canada conceded some on dairy, giving increased access to the market for American farmers. That was the #1 demand that President Donald Trump was making. In exchange, Canada gets to keep Chapter 19, the dispute settlement mechanism, something the Canadian government believed was vital. As for those steel and aluminum tariffs, they'll be dealt with in a side agreement. It's unclear exactly how that will unfold, but senior U.S. officials tonight seemed confident that it in fact could be resolved. We'll have more details on the deal tomorrow, but obviously huge news here tonight. There is a new NAFTA with a new name, with all sides claiming victory. Mercedes Stevenson, Global
And by
News.
the way, President Trump is scheduled to speak in about 20 minutes or so at 11 o'clock, and we'll keep you, of course, updated on today's top story. We have more news coming up right after this break.